By 1945, World War II was grinding to a close. The Allies swept to victory in Europe, but Japan ignored calls to surrender. Finally, 2 bombs would devastate 2 cities, launching a terrifying journey into the nuclear age. Next, an atomic end to a bloody chapter in world history through the lens. Hello, this is Tom Schaad. History through the lens. It has only happened twice in human history. The use of nuclear weapons against another country, the intentional use of nuclear weapons. And it happened in 1945, bringing about the end of World War II. I'm joined now by Jim Zobel. He's archivist with the MacArthur Memorial in Norfolk. And looking forward to hearing your views about this, because you know a lot about General MacArthur and also about the war in the Pacific during World War II. So if you could set the scene for us, the Allies pretty much won the war in Europe in May. They surrender, the Germans do, and now we have the Pacific to take care of. The Potsdam Declaration, Japan says we're not going to surrender. Can you take it from there?
Well, up until that time, they're getting ready for the invasion of Japan. MacArthur, as well as Nimitz's forces, are going to pretty much take a steamroller into southern Kyushu and then to Honshu in November of 45 and March of 46. And this is what they're really planning on. With the fall of Okinawa and the destruction of basically Japanese air power, they're beginning to see that maybe this thing will come to an end. And then Potsdam is really the hard declaration of the Allies. Now, the Potsdam Conference had taken place in July in Germany, and that's where Truman and I think it's Clement Attlee or Churchill, I can't remember who's in there yet.
I think Churchill was there.
I think Churchill's still there.
Yeah.
But he's about to
Stalin.
be voted out, for Clement Attlee, and of course Stalin is there. And this is when the Soviets are not in the war against the Japanese at this point. They had agreed at Yalta, which is a conference took place with Roosevelt and Churchill and Stalin earlier in 1945. And the Soviets, had agreed once the war in Europe was over, they would go to war against Japan. So when they're at Potsdam, the Chinese, the British, and the Americans come up with this Potsdam Declaration, which is going to be this hard contract that the Japanese have to fulfill. And basically it says that the war's over, you're going to be occupied, you're going to be reduced to the 4 islands. We are going to go after the war criminals, and the emperor will be subject to the supreme commander of the Allied powers. The Japanese are very worried, of course, about what will happen to the imperial institution. And so a lot of the interplay that goes on before that surrender is trying to solidify his position. But when they issue this Potsdam Declaration to the Japanese at the end of July 1945, they basically say, you will comply to this or you will suffer destruction. Because now Truman knows he's got the bomb, of course, the atomic bomb. They found out that those Trinity tests in Los Alamos had worked.
Right.
And so they know they've got this weapon that they can use. So Truman has this to back up this contract, this Potsdam Declaration, that if they do not surrender, that they will be subject to the use of these. It doesn't say that to anyone else, but it says utter destruction.
Did the Japanese have any idea what that meant?
Well, that's still being figured out right now. When it's believed that when August 6th, when Hiroshima is going to happen, that Hirohito is told, we have to go to a bunker, a special bunker. And Hirohito's, what do you mean, a special bunker? So the Japanese knew something was going on. They knew that there was this composite squadron that had been formed in the Marianas where all the strategic bombing locations are. And they know that something is going to happen, but they don't know exactly what it is, So we know that they have inklings. Something new is here. And when that is mentioned to Hirohito, this is before it's been dropped, but he says this war's got to end. Now there had been, Hirohito is in a position where he's the head of the state, but yet he's run by advisors and other people, and that's always been the interplay. Yes, Hirohito has his hands in the cookie jar. He knows about all these things that are going on, but he doesn't have any power to overrule people. And it was only during those last conferences, after the second bomb had been dropped, that he finally speaks up. But when he is informed that you got to go to this special bunker, and he makes that statement, that's when I think he gains the resolve. Because they've already destroyed 66 cities through firebombing,
right.
The B-29 raids. And now you've got this new thing that they don't really know, but it's going to be worse than that, And
it already dawned on the emperor that
I think so.
that we got to get out of this.
Right.
But people around him said our honor's at stake.
Yes, and they General, I think it was Anami, who's head of the Supreme Military Council. He wants to let the Americans land and give them a bloody nose, and try and get better terms. Which is just insane. They should have surrendered after Midway, in 1942.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, there's a lot of that part about honor. A lot of these guys will commit suicide. Once the surrender has been announced. But it comes down to they're getting ready to invade. The last couple of weeks, MacArthur starts thinking, okay, maybe this will be a bloodless invasion. They come up with this plan, Blacklist, which is like the occupation plan just to get in the country. And as well, all of a sudden, there's new weapon that's come out. And so there's a lot of uncertainty, and that certainty is definitely wiped out when they drop the bomb.
Yeah, and of course they had the tests that came out very positive, of course.
Right, yeah, which is what Truman had been informed of. I mean, when Truman got to be president, he didn't know about the bomb.
Right.
And it's something they told him, after he's elected. And they're working on this all through 45, General Groves and Oppenheimer. Probably everybody's seen the movie.
Right.
But they get this thing finally together, and they know it'll work.
Could you just differentiate the Japanese mindset during this part of the war to the American mindset in terms of, what they would do? You're talking about Hirohito saying, we got to end this thing because this looks really bad, and everyone else around him saying, no, we have to fight to the death.
The military leaders, Japan has never surrendered to anybody. Japan had never been occupied by anybody, throughout their long history. Nobody wanted to be on that, foot right there. So the Americans know it's going to end. It's just how is it going to end? And they're worried about all those casualties if they have to invade. Because you're going to have millions of civilians die. Renjiro Sode was a great scholar who I met when I first started working at MacArthur Memorial, and he said he was 10 years old being trained with a spear to get ready for the invasion.
Wow,
because everybody was going to be a part of this.
Women, children.
Yes, of course. And so it was going to be just another mass casualty event. And the Japanese would have definitely killed all the POWs that were in Japan, at that time. So it was something that, it's so horrible for the citizens of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It's so horrible for the fear factor it's created in the world that we live in. But if you look at it from the time, it saved millions of lives.
On that note, we're going to take a quick break and come back to the moments that this was unleashed, this horrific power over Hiroshima, after this. Welcome back. A very serious edition, an anniversary of 80 years since the bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Tom Schaad here with this edition of History Through the Lens. And of course, I'm joined by Jim Zobel from the MacArthur Memorial to talk about this very, I don't know, I want to call it a dark chapter, but a very somber chapter in the end of World War II and in world history. And let's go back now, August 6th. The time now is 8:14 a.m. And I'm quoting from an account from the National World War II Museum. And it comes from Reverend Kayoshi Tanamoto, who is a Methodist church He's a minister at a Methodist church there in Hiroshima. And he talks about the moments that the Enola Gay flew over Hiroshima and dropped that first bomb, little boy. He said the resulting reaction engulfed the city in a blinding flash of heat and light. The temperature at ground level reached 7,000 degrees Fahrenheit in less than a second. The bomb vaporized people a half mile away from ground zero. That was from the account. Now, Tanimoto saw, in his words, a tremendous flash of light that cut across the sky from east to west, from the city towards the hills. It seemed like a sheet of sun. Because Tanimoto was 2 miles from the epicenter of the explosion, he had a few seconds to throw himself between two large rocks in the garden of his friend's house. He then felt a sudden pressure and splinters and pieces of board and fragments of tile that fell on him. He would later go on to tend to the wounded and to the people who were suffering from that drop. Juxtapose that with the news received by President Harry Truman aboard the cruiser USS Augusta on his way back from the Potsdam Conference. Quoting from the account from National World War II Museum, he got the word that the bomb's detonation was successful. He immediately shared the news with his advisors and the ship's crew as the information was broadcast around the world and around the globe. They had received a reprieve from a death sentence. The end of World War II finally appeared to be in sight. You have this somber, very horrific scene in Hiroshima, and then a celebration on the American side. Two starkly different views from two starkly different sides of this particular conflict. It's just pretty amazing just to read that.
It's very stark contrast, that you've definitely pointed out there. But, this is the difference between victory and defeat. Most times in history, defeat just leads nothing to the destruction of your complete way of life. This is a point where if you don't, succeed, that's what you got to look forward to. So you can understand the different viewpoints coming from, the American side as well as the Japanese side. Of course, afterward, everybody realizes we're in a brand new era. It's the dawn of the nuclear age has launched something that now lives, over everybody.
Including with Iran.
Yeah, sure. Sword of Damocles is hanging there.
Yeah, yeah. And it was unleashed to end a great conflict and basically create a new world order. And that was the first bomb. We had to do a second one.
Yeah.
Over Nagasaki, some more than 250,000 killed. And
well, the Japanese didn't respond, after the first bomb went off. They chose to ignore it. A lot of people, it's said now that it wasn't until the second bomb was dropped on Nagasaki that they really knew what had happened at Hiroshima. Because all communications are destroyed. I mean, they know that this place has been wiped out, but just how, what has happened. It's almost something, and it's even what MacArthur said, this will seem supernatural. What has happened.
What happened to Japanese society at that point? And I know you've just come back from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is something, do they still talk about this?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, the peace festivals at Hiroshima are something that happen every year, and they're very strong. And it's very much the reason the Japanese are one of the main leaders in the cause of peace around the world. Of course, they still have the renunciation of war clause within their constitution. So this has affected them very deeply, and it's ingrained in not only their psyche, but the rest of the world. I mean, you look at how history's taught within the West, and even in Japan, there's Pearl Harbor, and then there's the bomb, and everything in between is kind of washed away.
Two different sides of the equation for Japan. Pearl Harbor, the strong Imperial Navy, and then
and it leads to what a lot of people said it would lead to. It led to the arms race. It led to constantly the Cold War and the constant worry about nuclear proliferation. Around the world, like you just said. We still got it going on today.
What does MacArthur think about this at this point in time?
Well, he doesn't know about the bomb until about 2-3 weeks before. Brigadier Thomas Farrell of the U.S. Air Force comes out and talks to him. And they tell him about this new power they have. They don't tell him they're going to drop it. They don't tell him, when it's going to be dropped. And Mrs. MacArthur was known to have said the statement that if he had known it was going to be dropped, he would have contacted Truman and told him not to. Whether that that's real, whether that's apocryphal, the story, he would say that they didn't need it. But the thing is what are you going to do? Are you going to invade? Would they have surrendered? Maybe. Are you going to wait around for it? Do you do what the Navy wanted to do, which was to have a blockade? Because then you're going to starve the entire population and kill 15 million people. So you've got a lot of really, significant decisions that are going on, not with only within the Japanese, but within the Americans as well. Is this going to do what we need to do? And I think with the Russians finally invade Manchuria and go to war against the Japanese on August 9th, which is a day after Nagasaki. And I think both of the events are enough to make the Japanese understand they have to surrender. I think the bombs convince everybody in Japan. And Hirohito, it's the Russians coming in that convince all those overseas commanders.
So was it a combination of both, the invasion of Russia and the
people,
the two bombings?
the commanders over the seas, they're like a new bomb. Well, what does that mean? It's just another bomb. Do they know what exactly this thing that has gone off has done? But when they hear, the full weight of the Soviet Union has come in against us now, I think that's what convinces them. So both of these factors are very influential in convincing the emperor to finally speak up, as well as to get all those troops. Because, there's 8 million troops overseas, in China and Manchuria and Southeast Asia. So everything comes together and finally makes this thing over with.
Okay. World War II is ended. The surrender is coming shortly after that. And now the legacy of these two bombings at Hiroshima and Nagasaki, thus ending World War II, or at least partially responsible for ending World War II, say many historians. We'll be back with more as History Through the Lens continues after this. Welcome back to this edition of History Through the Lens. I'm Tom Schaad. We are looking at the 80th anniversary of the end of World War II in the Pacific, namely the dropping of 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan, and that combined with the Soviet invasion of Manchuria. Those two factors pretty much brought the end of World War II, joined here by Jim Zobel, who's the archivist at MacArthur Memorial in Norfolk. And I'm going to ask to roll some B-roll here, some pictures here. We're seeing one of the tests there of this nuclear blast, and reading one of the accounts that it actually went off, I think 2,000 feet above the city, which is incredible. And you saw the aftermath there. There's the Enola Gay, the B-29 that dropped the bomb. But when you see the aftermath, the destruction that happened there in Hiroshima, it never ceases to amaze the awesome power of what this unleashed and how we are still feeling this 80 years later.
Oh, yeah, definitely. You can't look at it and just be amazed at the power of what it is capable of. There you see the entire city flattened.
Yeah.
Basically.
Wow. And again, no warning at all. America was the lone nuclear power, albeit not for long, because then the Soviets got theirs in 1949.
Yeah, August
1949. 4 years to the day,
yeah,
almost. And then the world has changed. The whole world order has shifted. Would you say because of these two acts, or just World War II in general?
Well, I think World War II in general puts a complete shift on everything in the world.
Sure,
all the colonials get kicked out of Asia, and but the lines are redrawn on practically everywhere. But the two bombs are the big thing. Nobody will ever be able to fight a war like they did World War II, because they'll be worried somebody's going to drop those bombs. If you get to it. And that's the thing that's always been hanging, then you got the H-bomb, then you got more megatons, then you got ballistic missiles, which can deliver them, pinpoint them on society. Now you've got people worried about suitcase bombs with, bringing them into cities or certain places, or dirty bombs. So it's something that is, like we were saying before, it's just, it's part of our lives now. And does mankind have the ability to stave it off? We have for 80 years, but there's still people that like to do horrible things.
And we heard people who have wanted to use tactical nuclear weapons
Sure.
even after World War II. And what about MacArthur in Korea?
Well, the thing is with MacArthur in Korea, he never asked to use it during the war. Even after the Chinese come in, he thought he could bomb a lot of those bases in Manchuria conventionally and be able to halt the Chinese ability to get, anything into North Korea. The thing is when he's there for that time, he sees it just as ridiculous because it's just constricted because of nuclear weapons to that Korean peninsula where and he says, this is not war. This is just murder because we're just over obliterating everything, turning everything into rubble, killing everybody. And he went home and started thinking, why are we not using our scientific advantage? And then I think he's thinking about it.
Right.
Now, is he thinking about it during the war? Probably, but he never asked to use it. Now, after he gets back and Eisenhower gets put into the presidency, MacArthur says, I know how to end this war in Korea. Right. And he goes to him and he says, okay, the Soviets, you're the only one that they trust. You go over there and talk to them, tell them we'll get out of East Germany, they get out of West Germany, we'll get out of Korea, they get out of Korea. Let's calm this thing down. Let's not go into this nuclear overload of building just, more and more incredible weapons. And if they don't want to do that, we'll end the war in Korea tomorrow. And he's, of course, there talking about nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I think that's what people get into. Why are we slaughtering all these people? Why are all of our people getting slaughtered when you could use our scientific advantage? But now there is no scientific advantage because everybody's got it.
Right. Now, a counterfactual for us, as we discussed earlier before we started taping, Germany or Japan, they get the nuclear weapon first before the United States. What would have happened, do you think?
No, I don't think they would have stopped.
1 bomb, 2 bomb, 3 bomb, 12 bombs, 20 bombs, 100 bombs.
That comes down to, we want the world and we want it now. And that's what they were both about, really. Soviets as well. The communists were, they would love to see us eradicated, but
it's when you say that, it's so important to get into the mindset of 1945 to 1955, like in that era where I think a lot of us don't understand what the world was like back then. And in our world, we've lived with this for 80 years, but back then this was all new and people were frightened every day of this. I mean, you remember the duck and cover drills and all those different things, the emergency broadcast system tests on your television and, the civil defense drills and all those different things. We don't have that anymore, though. We talk about nuclear weapons still with Iran and with Pakistan and India and developments in the Middle East and whatnot. But in those days, it was the Soviets and the United States. Mm-hmm. And these two giants, number 1 and 2, holding each other, holding it over each other's head.
Sure.
I mean, that was very chilling for a civilian population, wasn't it?
Well, to me, it's still there. I mean, I guess other people don't think about it, but I think about it quite a bit. We're still in a, pretty rough situation.
But all the more situation where like Ronald Reagan always said, peace through strength. I mean, so many of our presidents have taken that, and that was the reason to keep the peace. Whether or not you agree with that, that's a different discussion. But you can see the reason why, especially at that time.
Oh yeah, sure. And you always hope that, that philosophy is legitimate. We hope that there isn't some crazy person that's just like, well, I don't care. I'm just launching them anywhere. Anyway.
Yeah. Which, a nihilistic attitude we hope to avoid, especially on the world stage. We saw what it did in 1945, and it forever haunts us, the presence of these destructive weapons that can kill in a matter of milliseconds, but a great instructor on world history. The end of World War II in the Pacific, a topic of this edition of History Through the Lens. We want you to remember, thank you, Jim Zobel, for joining us today. And we want you to remember that we make history every day. Thanks for joining us.